We have to show up and to take responsibility and to own my part and to be the spouse that I have discovered or know that I need to be, despite whether my partner is continuously showing up or not, that I'm holding myself responsible to show up.
Get your daily dose of motivation on the Motivational Moments with Michelle podcast. In Motivation with Michelle podcast, you'll get encouraging, uplifting, and life-changing wisdom that will transform your world at your fingertips, 24 hours a day. Get a fuller, deeper revelation of the tools you can implement to see incredible transformation in your life from Michelle Neustadter's powerful teachings. Tune in whenever you need to be edified, uplifted, or a dose of motivation, no matter where you are. Subscribe to Motivational Moments with Michelle podcast with Michelle Neustadter today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SoundCloud.
And when I make that choice to choose to see the other side and remember those things, I'm intentionally shifting how I experience, feel, and perceive that person.
Right.
And that brings me back into a space where I want to be in unity.
Yes.
With my partner.
So therein lies the opportunity, because when people are listening and trying to figure out, well, how do I develop that kind of mindset? All I see is the negatives of my partner. All I'm fantasizing about are the reasons I want to leave this person. How do we get to this space where we can see beyond those rose-colored or crap-colored glasses that we're looking at our partner through? And how can we get to this place where we are actually addressing what I believe is the core problem here, which is mindset? How do we change mindset? Now, there's a bunch of different ways to do this, and we've talked about some of these strategies before, but I mean, how does somebody come face to face with the reality that I've been extremely judgmental of my partner, or I've put a bunch of expectations on them and I'm just as guilty as they of shoulding on them, and all I see is the negative? How would we shift that mindset? How would we go about changing the way that we think, which will impact the way that we feel, and ultimately will shift and manifest as behaviors, which reinforces thinking? So is that where we want to go? Like, what would make sense right now in terms of the audience listening and relationships? Where do we want to see this go, Michelle?
You know, we have to first become aware that we're doing it, right? Like I have to know that I'm doing these things that are creating the world that I'm living in right now. Because I think a lot of people don't even realize that. They don't realize that they are the sort of creator of the space in which they live right now. And okay, that's not to say that things don't happen, right? Like life still happens, but we still create the experience of that. We create the world that I live in. And until I become aware that I am creating that, I'm not ever going to do anything. I'm not going to change those mindsets, right? And so anybody who's listening to this is probably listening because there's a challenge in their relationship. And so I would challenge you to be thinking into how you're showing up, how you're feeling, perceiving, and all of that, because that is that mindset. Yeah, we have to create a level of awareness of what I'm doing, because then I can actually start to shift that mindset, right? It's that whole Carl Jung quote around until I make that unconscious conscious, right? It's going to rule my life and I'm going to just chalk it up to fate.
Yes.
As opposed to recognizing that within my unconscious world, I'm doing a bunch of things that are creating the behaviors, actions, reactions that I'm utilizing, which is creating the result that I'm getting back in my life. And when I create that awareness, then I can start to shift that mindset, because I can't do anything about it until I'm aware of it, right? And so then this does take us into a space then when we can do some of that deeper work too, right? Where we can actually start to shift and change the dynamics and the dance that we do in the relationship as well, and ask for our needs and all of those kinds of things. And so in our program that we were already discussing earlier, our program, the Fearlessly Anchored Marriages, we're doing just that. Like some of the starting modules are about developing some awareness but even some of the middle ones, right? Because we have the module on personality profiling, right? Like understanding yourself. We have the piece on the Johari window that allows you to recognize like what parts of yourself is out there, what parts do I keep hidden, so that we're still developing that awareness all the way through.
That's right.
And then in that, we're also giving like the strategies and the tools. But the whole idea is that not only are we creating that level of awareness, we're teaching you how to challenge and shift some of those mindsets, as well as adding in the tools and pieces that you need to create the relationship that you really want to see for your marriage.
And it's funny that even as we're both talking, another word that just sits on my spirit is responsibility. How quick are we in relationships to shift the responsibility to our significant other, versus where do we take responsibility? And I don't know if we probably did talk about this in our course, but the idea that responsibility is actually a two-word thing. It's this ability to respond. And do we possess the ability to make our partner respond differently? The answer to that would be no. How do we take personal responsibility and realize that it's up to me to change my mindset, to start looking at my bias, to look in, like that Johari window? Like, how do we see what we have not seen before? How do we know ourselves so that we can grow ourselves? It's one of the greatest opportunities, but it takes a lot of courage to start looking in, because it's so easy to look out. It's so easy to pick apart our partner and go, but they, and they don't, and this isn't fair, and I'm certainly not speaking to things that would border on abuse or anything like that. So if you guys are in a really tough situation, if it's abusive, we're not saying just lie down and just keep taking this stuff. That's not the spirit behind what we're saying. So if there are really challenging circumstances, this would be a great opportunity to lean in and get some perspective, contract with Michelle, contract with me, whatever, do the work and figure out, is this a relationship that we can salvage? And if it isn't, if it's a safety thing, then obviously there's certain steps that we have to take if this is an abusive situation, and we're not advocating to continue in abuse. But for many relationships that wouldn't cross that line, how do we start looking in? How do we realize this very simple truth that you cannot give what you do not have? And we have to kind of go in first. And that is the first challenge. Will you that are listening accept that challenge? Put your partner in a box for right now. It's not really about them. Back to your own bias or our own bias. How many of us have said, it's about me, in the way that we fight with our partner? What are you not doing for me? How do you not show up for me? So let's take that lens and explore it. Let's focus on, what about you? What about you needs to change? What about you do you need to understand differently? What about you has been patterned by social norms that influence our decisions? What about you has been inherited from your past or your family? If we ask those questions, if we go there, and you guys find the courage to ask those really challenging questions, we stand a very good chance on finding the information that you need to be able to make the lasting change that will heal you so that you can be your best self in, or potentially out of, this relationship. But we're hoping that it's going to be in.
Well, and that's partly why it requires the fearless part of the name, as well as it being anchored, right?
Yeah.
Hence the name of the program. We have to show up and to take responsibility and to own my part and to be the spouse that I have discovered or know that I need to be, despite whether my partner is continuously showing up or not, that I'm holding myself responsible to show up, requires a lot of courage. It requires us to really do a lot of that inner work, because we can get so focused on the outside stuff. But if I focus on me and I've set some boundaries for myself and I've said, nope, this is what I'm doing, come hell or high water, this is what I'm doing. And I mean, at the end of the day, we'll reevaluate, but for the next foreseeable future, this is what I'm doing, and I show up that way, things will change.
Yes.
It's not they will change, because you will change. And the funny thing is about when you're in partnership with somebody, when you're in a relationship with somebody, is that if you continuously are growing yourself and working on yourself and shifting yourself and showing up, they can't help but be pulled up with you.
Yeah. What's the saying? A rising tide raises all ships. So even the ones that we think they weren't anchored properly, all you need to do is rise the tide. Everything goes up. And I know it's a little corny, but I don't know where I heard this, but people talk about it's impossible. You have no idea. I like breaking apart words. I'm possible is the actual core of impossible. If we break that up, where do we see the action? It's on me. The situation might seem impossible, but the reality is I'm possible. I can change. I can do something. I might not change you, but I can change me. I may not be able to change the storm, but I can change my orientation point. I can change how I navigate. I can change how I ride through the wind and the waves. I can adjust my sails. I don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, this pessimistic mindset, this is going to end in tragedy and whatever. I could just be a realist and adjust my sails based on the way the wind is blowing right now and move towards a destination that allows me to discover my own possibility, because I'm possible, even in impossible situations.
And so I feel like if there's, a good takeaway from today, from this message, there's really that recognition that we all carry some of these mindsets. I mean, human nature is fairly naturally selfish. So we all carry some of these selfish mindsets. But if I can challenge myself to become aware of some of those pieces that are impacting on how I show up in my relationship, then I can challenge that mindset, which then allows me to be different in that space, which is going to change the whole space.
Do you want to reignite the spark in your relationship?
How can you be more fearless?
How can you anchor yourself to the truths you know, but you aren't living out?
Fearlessly Anchored Marriages is a program that will teach you to live love intentionally. Anything you want in life does not come accidentally.
So why would your relationship be any different?
Over the next 12 weeks, you will be exposed to some of the mindset blocks that could interfere with your current relationship. You will be coached to learn how to set boundaries, how to recognize opportunities, how to develop self-awareness, how to lead yourself and lead your relationship.
We've all been there. The struggle is real. We want to feel connected, heard, valued, and loved. Join us in transforming your relationship. Reignite the flame.
Reconnect. Refresh.
Fearlessly
Anchored Marriages. Let's live love
intentionally.